Hello YouTube. If you're watching this, you sure have a problem with your key fob on your VAG Passat. Well, guess what? That happens not only to the VAGs, but actually along the whole VAG group. So in my case, we have a key fob. In the key fob, the key is stuck into the ignition. I cannot pull it out. Once the car is turned off, there is no way for me to pull out a key. So how does the thing first of all works? Well, it's straightforward. The key fob has two solenoids that are actually locking down the keys. Remember, the key had these two little holes for the Passat and is the same for Audi. Well, what it does is that once you enter the key inside, it pushes these two solenoids like that and it locks the key. In my case, we have the ignition key inside. The car is running right now, but once I turn it off, it's not going to release it. Now, there are a few cases that this can happen. The first one is where you have a problem with the shifter. Now, if the shifter is not accurately detected to be in the parking position, like in our, well, not like in our case, but anyways, then in this particular case, you would have to try to push it onto the parking position. Now, keep in mind, this is a fragile thing, so don't kick it, don't push it hard, but what you want to do is to try to push it a little bit further, try to move it a little bit to the left and to the right. There is not much slack to do that, but anyways, if that happens, you would expect to see the parking light on, and of course, on the cluster, you would see the same here, the parking should go on. If you see the parking, it means that the actual slide detector here, the electronics, are detecting for the parking to be on the proper side. Once this is done, once you turn off the car, like I'll do, you'll be able to pull out the key. There are cases where this, for whatever reason, is stuck onto the so-called Tiptronic or the manual. What you want to do in that case is to start a car or put in ignition mode. Of course, go to the drive, push the lever to the right so that it controls the manual, and push it forward and backward so it goes through the upshifting and downshifting. Then return it again to the parking mode, and usually if that was your problem, it will release the key. That's the second thing. Now there is a third situation. So you may have placed the wrong key there. If that is the case, even though you're in parking position, the key fob may not release the key. Now, I've tried with another key just for the sake of the test, and my particular case, it did release the key, but I've seen comments over the internet that people are saying it does not release. Hold your brake and hold the little thing, the little button on the shifter. Now, when you hold this for a few seconds, if everything is fine, the key will be released. In my case, that doesn't work as well. There is another scenario which the solution is exactly the same if your battery is drained on the key. In some cases, the key fob is not going to detect the key inside and may lock it. So the only way to release is this. If that does not work, like in my particular case, what you want to do as a final resort is to actually unplug the negative of the battery. Now, the battery is either on front or on the back, depending on the setup of the car. That applies for B6, B7, and Audis as well. So you just unplug it, and then the key fob will release for sure. The key fob, as I mentioned, works with power. That keeps the solenoid locks, and once the power is gone, it just removes it. So that's solution done. Now, if that does not work, it means that there is something wrong with the actual solenoids within the key fob that will need a replacement for the key fob. So here's how to replace it. Replacing the key fob is fairly straightforward. Now keep in mind that the cars are usually left-hand drive and right-hand drive, and I don't know of any other option, to be fair, but anyways, who knows. Left-hand drives are fairly straightforward. You have to remove the cap. I have a spare one, so I'll show you. Here is the spare one. How to remove it: you push gently the little door. Be careful not to push completely and break or unplug the door, because there is a little, as you can see, spring holding it, and if that goes away somewhere along those holes there, then you'll be in a big trouble finding it. So keep in mind that. So gently push it, and use a flat screwdriver to actually push those metal brackets that are holding. There you go. There's from the other side that are holding the cap. Once you push them, you can gently pull this like that, and it will release. Nothing's holding. Once you remove it, you see the key fob behind. The key fob looks like this, and it's held. Sorry, this is the right accurate position. It's held by a T20, I think, screw, like most of the screws here. So you just unscrew that screw, and you'll be able to push that forward, meaning it will go inside the dashboard. What you want to do from that is to remove a trim that is just above the pedals. There are 3 T20s holding it, and there is one additional one that is white and it's looking a little bit different, but still it's T20 holding the actual dashboard, which is located to the very right. You have to remove that as well because it will give you slack, like a few centimeters, I think around 2. It will give a slack for the actual dashboard to go downwards, just so much so you can pull out this from there. It will give you enough space with the cables, around I think 10-15 centimeters with cables falling down for you to release it. Be careful when releasing it because I already broke my jacking here, so feel free to help it a little bit with the flats, with a flat screwdriver from here. Keep in mind it locks, you see it, be careful with that. Remove it, and then you probably have to figure out a way to not break it, or maybe break it to remove your key from there. And then after, of course, buy a new one or a second-hand used one that works and push it there. So keep in mind that if you're doing this, I would usually recommend to use the same numbering like mine, and keep in mind that the letter at the very end is important. That letter for all of the modules for this car and every other car represents the revision. The revision is essentially a change within the module that is somewhat related usually to software. Some people say that they're also mechanically different. I cannot vouch for that. I really don't know. But if you use the same number with the same letter at the very end, it means it's exactly the same module as yours. You shouldn't really have any problems. Now, when you get to the point where you have to push it back, it's a little bit more difficult because you'll be able to push it behind the trim down there, and it will be in the hole under the dashboard without disassembling anything. You have to remove the media. Now, my media, in my case, is fairly easily removable, but in your case, you might have to remove the trim and also 4 screws, again, T20 at the very ends. Now, why would you want to do that? Because there is a hole to the left in here that you can put your fingers in and help when you're trying to fit the key fob into the right place. Of course, you have to use your other hand in the here. There is a crack that you can push your fingers inside and actually help yourself. It will be a tricky road, you know, to replace that, but it's not as difficult as it sounds, and actually can be done without disassembling the whole thing. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with this, feel free to disassemble the whole dash. It will take you another hour to do so. I kind of skipped that. Anyways, so that's how you replace the key fob. So my case was a little bit different, and it was much more difficult to actually diagnose. What you would need to, from this particular step on, is to actually use a VCDS. For those of you who are stuck with me already so far in this video, most likely. The point is that when you have few modules that are actually working together, you'll be able to see what's happening on 2 sides of a specific connection. Now, what I did is fairly straightforward. I hooked up the VCDS and I hooked up to the gearbox module. There is a neat feature that, in my opinion, not a lot of people are actually using, probably because they don't know what they're doing with VCDS, but you can actually use the thing called advanced mass measuring or something like that. That will allow you to actually see the data that is provided to different parts that the module controls. So to keep it simply, imagine that the module has a lot of cables, a lot of pins, and it has a lot of ways to detect what's happening with this, right? So that's what we're doing. So hooking up to the automatic transmission, you'll be able to actually see the so-called selector, or the electronics that controls and realize where the shifter is. And you'll be able to see what data is received by the computer. If everything is fine with the shifter, you'll be able to see that when the shifter changes positions, for what you need, of course, to ignition the car and give it power and basically change its positions to see how it reacts. If there is a problem with the electronics of the selector, so again, the selector is the thing that realizes where the shifter is, then you won't be able to see, for example, if you put it in parking position, you won't be able to see the parking in the diagnostic tools, right? If that works, you have to move to the other direction. The other thing in the chain before the key fob is the control module under the steering wheel. When you hook to that thing up, I think the module number was 43 or 46. You'll be able to see again what the selector is being feeding this module with, which is an important thing. The other thing is you'll be able to see the lock position in the key fob. Now, why do we care? Well, we care because if there is some sort of a problem with the selector, or maybe with the connection between the selector and that module, you won't see what's happening in the selector, in the shifter. Meaning, if you place the shifter in parking position, you won't see that parking position in that module. Also, you see what the module is actually telling the key fob to do. Now, I've mentioned that in the beginning, but there is the driving mode on code thing, right? So that keeps the key locked. And in my particular case, for whatever reason, that's stuck, meaning something is telling the key fob to keep the key locked. The key is locked because my module is faulty. Now, there is no error whatsoever in my module. There is no error in the key fob module. There is no error in the shifter module in my particular case. So I need to replace that thing. So thanks for staying with me. Hope that helped. If you have any comments, feel free to add it in the comment section in the video, and I really hope it was helpful for you.